officials admit that fentanyl is coming to our country illegally from Mexico. Mexican cartels import precursors from China and other countries, manufacture for them for sale at massive labs, and then traffic them across the border and into the interior of our country. Even though we're some 1,200 miles away from the border, Montana is not out of reach. As the Attorney General announced this week, and this is staggering, law enforcement has seized nearly twice as much fentanyl in the first 6 months of this year than the past 3 years combined. Action is urgently needed, but the Biden administration is only letting the problem get worse. In October of last year, I traveled to the border with 9 other governors. We sent President Biden a 10-point plan he could execute immediately to protect America, restore security, and end the crisis. And we asked him for a meeting. He hasn't responded, and he hasn't acted, so we have. This spring, I joined the American Colonel Lavin is our lead for Montana on the strike force, and I appreciate his efforts. Colonel, thank you. They are on the front lines, executing drug busts, responding to overdoses, and holding drug dealers accountable. I'm grateful for their heroism. And we're also focused on treatment and prevention, because it's one of the best defenses we have to the fentanyl crisis we face. And I want folks to know, if you are or you know someone who's trapped in addiction, there are services available to help. Please reach out. We'll connect you with those services. Everyone up here shares a common goal to bring this crisis to an end. I'd like you to hear from them, starting with Gallatin County Sheriff Dan Springer and his team. Sheriff?
Thank you for this opportunity. This is a national issue, but it has local consequences. There are over 2,300 local law enforcement officers in the state of Montana. This will be solved at the local level. We know that it is our work and our tireless efforts at the local level that will continue to find people that are involved in drug distribution as well as drug use. We as law enforcement need to stay focused on investigating drug crimes. The model needs to include rehabilitation, but not without incarceration. Incarceration has to be part of this, so there's consequences to distribution of drugs. These people need to be taken off the streets. They are wreaking havoc within our communities. We need prosecutors and government officials like the ones standing up here today that are serious here today in what I believe to be one of the most beautiful places on earth. About 30 years ago, I chose to live in this community. I chose to raise my family here. My deputies and I standing behind you recognize that it is our responsibility to continue to work tirelessly to make sure your family, your children, and your friends are safe from fentanyl and other drugs. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sheriff. I'd now like to invite Attorney General Austin Knudsen, Montana Highway Patrol Colonel Lavin, and Administrator for Montana's Division of Criminal Investigations, Brian Lockerbie, up to speak and share their thoughts.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. This is an absolutely necessary discussion. I want to thank the rest of the delegation for being here. Senator Daines, Congressman Rosedale, the government, thanks for putting this together. I consider fentanyl truly the #1 threat to Montana. And we certainly have a lot of things to be talking about. Fentanyl truly has emerged as the top threat, I think, to Montana, and I think a lot of other attorneys general would say the same thing. We are seeing unprecedented levels of overdoses, of fentanyl deaths seizures. Fentanyl is where the market is at right now. Fentanyl is what the Mexican cartels are pushing on our states and into Montana. I want to give you a handful of numbers. Just since 2019, fentanyl seizures have increased 58 times in Montana. We are halfway through 2022 and we are already on pace to shatter, absolutely shatter, last year's record seizures of illegal fentanyl in Montana. This is an absolute poison that is tearing our communities and our state apart. I was on statewide radio yesterday and I had the opportunity to visit with a lady from Poplar, my home part of the state, Roosevelt County. That poor woman has lost 2 of her sons in 2 separate fentanyl overdoses in Roosevelt County. She's now raising her grandchildren in Poplar because those children lost their fathers. This is the stuff that is happening every day in Montana. What are we doing about it? People ask me, why is the Montana Department of Justice getting involved in litigation on the southern border? This is exactly why. This is why I and many other state attorneys general have sued the Biden administration over its disastrous border policies. We know where this fentanyl is coming from. It's not being made in Montana. It's not being made in the U.S. It is 100% being made by the Mexican drug cartels in Mexico using largely Chinese ingredients, and it's smuggled across our southern border because the border is wide open and because President Biden is not enforcing the immigration laws that we already have on the books. That's why Montana has been in the forefront of these lawsuits. That's why we're going to keep being in the forefront of the lawsuits. I've got some gentlemen here with me who I think can talk to this problem with a little more authority. I'd like to first bring up our Division of Criminal Investigation Administrator, Brian Locker.
Thank you, Attorney General. Our agents are working drug cases in every corner of the state. They're supporting every local agency in Montana with their own drug challenges, partnering with the Highway Patrol, and participating in every local drug task force, both local and federal. On a daily basis, our agents are supporting active and ongoing narcotics cases everywhere. The data speaks for itself. Massive quantities of fentanyl, large amounts of meth, rising overdoses, and predictions that were due to surpass the number of guns seized on drug cases from last year. Regardless of the negative, I have to commend the quality of the work that law enforcement and public health are doing in the field. In my career, I have never seen such a high level of collaboration and commitment from so many levels. Patrol officers, chiefs, sheriffs, task forces, prosecutors, courts, and corrections are all trying to do their part to help with this crisis. We're doing a lot of things right. We're fighting a good fight, but it certainly feels like we're outgunned and our resources are strained. I'll turn it over to Colonel Lavin from the Highway Patrol.
Good morning. As the Chief Administrator of the Montana Highway Patrol, one of my top priorities is to combat the transnational criminal drug trade that is affecting every community, large and small, in Montana. We've seen a significant uptick in fentanyl seizures statewide the last few years. In 2019, the entire Montana Highway Patrol had 0 fentanyl seizures. Just first half of this year, 26,000 fentanyl dose pills have been seized. 3,800 last year, so you can see the significant increase. Meth seizures remain super high as well. Meth is kind of the drug of choice of Montana, and it's a significant driver of violent crime. We've seized already this year, in the first half only, 70 pounds of meth. All of last year's 69 pounds. So you can see that it continues to be a huge problem as well. One of the things that we've been doing in the Highway Patrol to help combat this issue with support from the Attorney General is we've deployed 2 criminal interdiction teams across the state. They primarily work interstate areas, they work with the local partners, they work with their federal partners, and to combat this serious problem in Montana. So we've also increased our canine operations plan due to the grant program through the Attorney General's office, along with our local partners as well. I want to take the time to thank Senator Daines. A lot of this criminal interdiction team came through a U.S. DOJ camp grant. He supported us in navigating the federal bureaucracy to get this grant. So, in closing, fentanyl and meth seizures are at a critical crisis levels, as well as the increase in violent crime. We have to come together as a team and focus our necessary resources to keep our state the last best place. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your leadership. Congressman Rosedale, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out here this morning to address this real problem that's facing not just our state but the nation. We've been talking about this for about 18 months because we could see on the horizon with the failed Biden administration on the southern border that this was just one of the components, one of the byproducts that we were going to have to address when you have a completely wide open southern border. We also have human trafficking that we're going to have the consequences and experiences of for another decade going into the future. We've got human indentured servitude that is taking place with many of these illegals that are coming across our southern border. But this fentanyl crisis is something that is taking place right now, and you can very easily, as you've heard from the Attorney General and from the law enforcement agencies behind us here, connect the dots from Bozeman, Montana, all the way back to Beijing, China. This is an attack, a chemical attack from the Chinese Communist Party on our nation. We had 105,000 people die in the United States last year from drug overdoses, and the vast majority of that was from fentanyl. We've got to stop this. It's one thing to have intervention and treatment here in our communities, but we have to stop the flow. And we don't have theories on how to stop that flow. We know that we have examples, clear examples, that were demonstrated under the Trump administration on how to keep our border secure. And that is where this is happening. We have to re-implement the Remain in Mexico policy. We have to put pressure on the Northern Triangle countries to make sure that they are not allowing people to come through. And we have to tighten up this entire border. And we've spent billions of dollars around the country, many of which we have discovered now. The Inspector General found $163 billion in waste and fraud in the so-called COVID relief program. We need to start taking those dollars and using them to secure our own nation, and we can do it. So I thank the Governor, the Attorney General, Senator Daines, Sheriff, all the law enforcement agencies for all of their work to try and stop this tide, and I will do everything that I can to continue to push back and secure our southern border so that we can stop threatening the lives of people across our nation and here in the good state of Montana. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, for being here. Finally, I'd like to welcome Senator Steve Daines to the podium. Sir.
Governor, thank you. I'm struck by the contrast here this morning as we're looking out at Sacagawea Peak, community of Montana, in front of us, Galton Peak behind us. We're talking about a very, very ugly scourge that has affected Montana, and that is the scourge of fentanyl. If I were to ask you what's the leading cause of death for 18 to 45-year-olds in this country, you might say suicide, you might say COVID, you might say car accidents. The leading cause of death this past year for 18 to 45-year-olds is fentanyl. The drugs are coming from China, they're coming into Mexico and manufactured and then coming across our southern border. There are two cartels primarily that are driving this. The Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel. What they do is they put drones up on the southern border. They're monitoring the flood of the illegals coming across the border. And when they see where the illegals are coming across, they then radio to their drug smugglers, their mules, to get the drugs, the fentanyl, across the border. That's why the crisis on the border of some 2 million illegal apprehensions that are coming across ties to this issue of drugs and how it ties directly here to Montana. It's just a matter of 48 hours from the time those drugs cross the southern border until they're right here in Montana. These are very sophisticated distribution systems. And I'm grateful for the men and women in law enforcement, drug interdiction. They're working their hardest to keep our community safe. The reason you see the increase in felonies, particularly violent crimes and homicides, you ask every one of these members of law enforcement, why? Why are we seeing more homicides in Montana? Why are we seeing this dramatic increase in felonies? Why are our prosecuting attorneys, district attorneys in our counties overwhelmed? It's because of drugs. You tie it right back to this administration's policies, the Biden administration, of allowing these illegals to come across. They throw up their arms, they claim asylum, and here's a shocking statistic. I just talked to one of my colleagues who was on the southern border a couple weeks ago. It's now about 8 years from the time they're apprehended on the border until they get an asylum hearing. The court systems are backed up. So that's why you have what we call this catch and release. They come into our country, they're released, they say, show up for your hearing in 8 years. It's a disaster, it's a crisis. Montana is a northern border state with a southern border crisis.
Thank you, Senator. This is a serious crisis. It's hurting our families, it's hurting our communities, and it's filling the pockets of the drug cartels. President Biden must act to end this crisis. With that, we'd be happy to open it up for questions. Who'd like to go first? Yes.
Governor, Shaylee Rager, Montana Public Radio. You spoke about state government taking on the job that you see the federal government should be doing. Can you, break down for me exactly what that means?
Sure. This was an initiative started by Governor Ducey in Arizona, the Border Strike Force. I'm proud to have Colonel Lavin participating on behalf of Montana. And this is a program where a couple of dozen states have banded together to do additional law enforcement action to step up our interdiction on the drugs. Yes, Holly.
This is, I think, for whoever wants to answer. You talked a lot about litigation efforts. You're looking at law enforcement efforts. I know there's other things. Your heart fund. There's programs like that. Are also looking at the demand side. Is there anything more that you'd like to see done there? I think other states have looked at things like fentanyl testing strips, have those available for people who might not know that they're taking a fatal dose of fentanyl, that kind of stuff. Are there other programs you'd like to see expanded? While you're working on this law enforcement side, but also sort of deal with that demand piece of when people were purchasing.
Now, I'll comment quickly, then open it up. I'd say, number one, we need aggressive law enforcement action to interdict the drugs and put the drug dealers behind bars. Secondly, we need to get help to the people that are trapped in addiction. That's what the Heart Fund is all about. But ultimately, these drugs are coming in from Mexico. We must secure the border.
Yeah. Holly, I briefly, a couple of your points there. I think testing strips is a really good idea practically because we are seeing more and more of other drugs that are now being tainted with fentanyl. It looks like the cartel's doing that intentionally. We're starting to see a lot of marijuana that's laced with fentanyl. Pretty common for us to find heroin laced with fentanyl. So I do think testing strips is probably a good idea. Now there's going to be a backside to that. What we found is when we're making announcements about a bad batch of fentanyl and overdoses in the community, we've actually seen it sometimes that can drive up demand because a lot of the fentanyl addicts think that that's a good batch, and I think we might see something like that with fentanyl test strips as well. My biggest concern with fentanyl test strips right now, I think it's a really good idea to test something else. They'd be technically illegal right now under our paraphernalia statute, Title 45. I think the legislature is going to have to take a look at that. And that's something that we're definitely looking at the Department of Justice as well.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Nobody else. I'm curious, understanding the Mexico connections, is there anything you see, and this would maybe be more at a federal level, but to look at what's coming in from China to Mexico with the importation of all these chemicals, is that?
One of my trips to China prior to COVID, I met with the premier. We raised this very issue with the Chinese government to stop these chemicals that are coming into Mexico. They're doing nothing about it. And
fact, I think China sees this as a way to continue to destabilize and demoralize our country. I think that the focus right now should be on Mexico. We need to have a hard conversation with the Mexican government and ask for their assistance. These cartel laboratories are in locations, our intel, they know where they're at. We need help from the Mexican government here to destroy these labs, these manufacturing facilities. But I would say, lastly though, the lowest hanging fruit at the moment is to secure the southern border. I mean, this is a complicated issue. There's multiple facets to the solution, but there are some solutions that we needed to put in place and stop the flow of illegals. Right? We're going to see over 2 million illegal apprehensions on the southern border. These are an all-time record. And the challenge you face when you have border patrol and members of law enforcement, it's a zero-sum situation. They're spending all their time chasing you. Go down to the southern border. I encourage you to go down there, spend a night. Like I've done that with border. They'll tell you what needs to happen. Reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy. Keep the Title 42 policy in place. That would have a dramatic reduction of the illegals coming across the border.
Senator, real quick, when you're saying, you just mentioned two policies you'd like to see go back in place, but I want to make sure I understand. And anyone else who talks about securing the border, does that mean closing the border for a time, or what exactly does that look like?
It doesn't mean closing the border. What happens with Remain in Mexico is put in place by the prior administration. So when they come across the border, they claim asylum. All I have to do is use the word fear. I have fear in my country. That's the word. And then they're allowed to come into the country and remain in the United States until their asylum hearing is adjudicated. It's a very small percentage, less than 10% have legitimate asylum claims. And they literally get to pick their city of jurisdiction where they want to be here. So if they want to go to Chicago, want to go to New York, they're released the country within 90 minutes, and they're told to come back to their hearing in 8 years. That creates the incentive in the flood as illegals come across the southern border. And then our agents are busy dealing with the flood of illegals instead of focusing on interdiction codes. And I've talked to the Border Patrol. I've spent 2 trips down there. I'm going to go again next week because we continue to see the problem increasing. And the Remain in Mexico policy did work. 75% of the people that were held in Mexico returned to their country of origin. You have a very small percentage that have a valid asylum claim, as Senator Dane said. But if they're released into the country and they're 8 years before they get a hearing, 98% plus of those people never arrive at their hearing anyway. So while, Holly, I think that it's a good idea to try and apply some pressure on China, I don't have high hopes on that because the Chinese Communist Party doesn't really give a hoot about the United States, and they're incentivized to try and get those drugs into our country. We have to secure our southern border. And no, that does not mean to close the southern border. It means to secure it so that we know who is coming and going into our country.
Yes.
Hey, Governor. One question that kind of came to mind. Have you been in talks, or has your administration been in talks with the Mexican government as to kind of how to take steps to curb that fentanyl coming into Mexico?
Yeah, the role of foreign diplomacy is really rests in Washington. I don't know if it's just we have to do what we can here in the state. Well, to be clear on that. Yeah. Good. Well, I want to say, did you have a follow-up, Holly?
Oh, I was just curious. I was told this location is sort of strategic. It's one of the corridors maybe. And I'm sort of wondering as drugs, it's fentanyl specifically, is entering Montana, sort of where those points of concern are and how it's moving around the state.
So this is, Highway 191 runs to the, south of here all the way down to Highway 50 or Interstate 15 in Idaho. So yes, it's a corridor for drugs to be transported up into Montana. Obviously I-90, I-15, those are also corridors. And I know the Highway Patrol is working really hard on the east and west ends of the interstate to work the interdiction there. But any of these highways are the corridors. Here in Bozeman, obviously you're out here in an area that is part of our growth, which brings great things to this community and also brings other problems. So we're out here for that reason and for the corridor, and so that's kind of where we're looking.
Thank you for Highway Patrol. What has law enforcement across the state learned about drug interdiction from the meth? The explosion of meth we've seen in the last couple of decades. What have we learned from that, and how is maybe fentanyl a little bit different, or how are you able to use those tools to combat fentanyl
Just to repeat the question, you're asking what have we learned from interdiction and from our experience with meth and then with fentanyl?
And is fentanyl a different beast? Is it still, confidential informants? Is it still highway interdiction? How is what we've learned from meth the same, and how is companion to fentanyl?
Police work hasn't changed, in the way we conduct investigations for narcotics, whether it was cocaine, marijuana, whatever. And a lot of things that we're finding are polydrug. So you're not just going to stop a vehicle that has fentanyl in it. It's also going to have meth in it. It also may have some pills. So that hasn't changed. But what's changed with fentanyl is the risk level. I mean, this is colorless, odorless, and tasteless, and it comes in micrograms, sufficient enough to kill a trooper making a traffic stop for one of these deputies behind. So that's the first risk. And then you think about the way it's transported and handled. You stop at a hotel, there's potential for fentanyl to be laced for the next family that comes into the hotel. And then you have fatalities that happen on the receiving end. That's what's changed. Meth is a slow killer. Fentanyl is an instant killer.
Great. Well, I want to thank our partners in law enforcement for your work and the deputies being on the front line, for our federal delegation, Steve and Matt, Attorney General, for your work, and all of you for coming out to talk about this.